Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Sweden and we're going to return to a brewery that has now featured on the channel a good number of times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the last couple of years. They are still a relatively new addition to the Swedish beer scene, but they are doing some very, very good beers, and I would consider them very much a kind of up-and-coming Swedish brewery. I think it's fair to say that this brewery are best known for their different New England hazy, whatever you want to call them, IPAs, and also for their modern sour beers, the Berliner Weisses and Goses and things like this. So if these are two style categories that you find yourself interested in, this is one of the Swedish breweries that I would highly, highly recommend that you check out. Now, the beer that we're going to have a look at today is a style that I know these guys can do very well. We've reviewed several examples of this style from them on the channel before, but this one is a wee bit different compared to those examples that we've had in the past. And I have to say, I'm very curious to see what it has in store for us, and I've heard very good things about the beer itself as well. So yeah, hopefully this is another good one. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always, I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this beer as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head up towards Gothenburg once again, Göteborg, as you would say in Swedish, the Swedish craft beer capital up there on the west coast. Got to get the Gothenburg catchphrase in when we're reviewing Gothenburg beers because it is just channel tradition these days. And for this review, we are going to return once again to the wonderful Fermenterarna, or the fermenters, as you would call them in English. These guys were, of course, based very recently in Strömstad, and they've only moved in the last couple of months. But yeah, this particular beer is supposed to be pretty damn good. So this one is called Skeleton Pre-Party. It comes in at 6% ABV, and this one is a Gose with Yuzu and Blackcurrant added into it. But this particular beer was released as part of the local Småskalig assortment through Systembolaget here in Sweden for April of 2022, along with the Skeleton Party, which was a New England double IPA. We reviewed that last month. I just didn't have time to review this one before I went travelling actually. But yeah, as you know if you've watched the channel for any length of time, I am a huge fan of Yuzu sour beers, so when I saw that Fermenterarna were going to have a go at brewing one, I thought, you know, that is one that we really need to review. So yeah, looking forward to this one. Let's crack on with the review then and see how we go. So, as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Fermenterarna before, and we will no doubt add more to that list at some point in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Swedish beers I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, on to my brewery notes then, to tell you a little bit about Fermenterarna then. So Fermenterarna, as I've told you before, was founded by Niklas Aronsson and Anna Claesson, who founded the company together back in 2018. So the brewery was originally based in Strömstad in Västra Götaland, very close to the Norwegian border, a very picturesque little fishing village. If you look at the pictures of it, it looks absolutely great actually, so it is somewhere that I do hope to visit sometime. But apparently Niklas ordered a beer in a bar one day without really knowing what it was, and it turned out that this was the Tropic Thunder from Dugges Brewery, who are one of the kind of pioneers of the Swedish beer scene. That one, of course, is brewed in collaboration with Stigberg. It's artisanal from America, a famous gypsy brewery, and I would consider Tropic Thunder as the kind of cult classic Swedish sour craft beer. So yeah, that was Aaron's entrance into the whole idea of craft beer and sour beer and things like this. Anna, on the other hand, had a long interest in things that ferment. She ran the restaurant Kostas Trädgårdar, and through that she had done various different things. She'd worked with sauerkraut, sourdough bread, you name it, she had fermented it. So yeah, that was one of the main reasons behind them calling the brewery the Fermenters, because of Anna's history with fermenting different things. And of course, Aaron had done a little bit of home brewing and things like this as well. So the brewery started off with a small 200 litre brew kit and some tanks, and in late 2018 they actually took a break to expand the company because their beers were very well received at different festivals. So they decided they were going to have a crack at this craft beer market, and they've done very well out of it, obviously. But they now boast, they soon after that they got a new facility with two 500 litre brew kits and a total tank capacity of 17,000 litres. And over the course of 2019 they were aiming to brew 50,000 litres, but at this point in time they said they had the equipment to brew up to 250,000 litres of beer per year. But in August of 2021 they moved to a new brewery in Hisingen in Gothenburg, Göteborg, a bit to the south, and they took their equipment with them. But from what I understand, they now have a new 3,000 litre brew kit. I'm not sure if that has been installed and is operational yet, but it soon will be, I'm sure, and they are planning to open up a tap room and restaurant at some point in the very near future. But according to Untappd, these guys have produced around 130 different kinds of beer as of May 2022. And like I said to you earlier, this brewery is best known for their kind of New England hazy, whatever you want to call them, IPAs, but also the kind of modern sour beers, the Berliner Weisses and Goses and things like this. I think it is mainly Goses that they release. I think we've maybe only had one or two Berliner Weisses from them in the past, but I think it's more accurate to call these beers modern sours rather than anything else. But yeah, that is all I can tell you about Fermenterarna for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can of course check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all those different beers that they've done. So yeah, let's leave it at that for the history section, and let's get on and have a little look at the beer itself. I can take my breath now. So, yes, I'll just let you have a little look at the artwork on this one before we open it up. As you can see, the artwork on this is quite typical of what you'd expect for Fermenterarna. We've seen lots of different things like this. There you can see on the back of the can, this is the Fermenterarna brewery symbol, or one of them at least. You can see skeleton pre-party. Let me just put my face behind it so it focuses. But yeah, as I said to you earlier, this one contains blackcurrant and yuzu, but it's also got some nice wheat malt and oats in there as well. But yeah, gold top on the can, which is quite typical for Fermenterarna actually. And there you can see the skeleton is getting nice and merry on his fruity, bright sour beer. But yeah, 440 milliliter can, this one. I believe I paid about 50 Swedish kronor for this, so that translates to roughly €5, £4.50. Somewhere in the region of like $5.50 American, which isn't bad for a sour beer actually. So yeah, nothing else I think we really need to say about that. It should be pretty nice. Let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. Very curious to see what this is going to have in store for us. So come to think of it, I actually don't know what the last Yuzu sour beer that I reviewed on the channel was. I really couldn't tell you. And pretty much all the beer that I drink, I review on the channel, of course. I do work in a pub a little bit and we get lots of craft beer, so I do have little tasters of different things actually. So yeah, but the main ones when I actually sit down and drink a can of beer, they're pretty much all those beers are on the channel. So yeah, that's that. So there we go, we'll get this guy out and into the glass. As you can see, the colour of this beer is pretty damn impressive actually. So yeah, before the head disappears on this one, you can see it's poured with a half finger of a frothy, I would say almost violet head. Just look at the colour of that. That is awesome. That is very, very cool. But you can see a mix of kind of small and slightly medium-sized bubbles, but this beer does look absolutely beautiful, I have to say. So yeah, in terms of visible carbonation, there's not a lot there. There are one or two big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass, but a few little ones going up toward the bottom of the head there. But overall, it does look, you know, really nice. You can see the head is just fading away to be a very thin foamy layer in the middle, but you have a thicker foamy ring around the edge of the glass. So in terms of colour, I would describe this one as being, oh, how would you even describe this? It is pretty much like, you know, outer space, kind of dark blue. It's almost like that. This is one of the darkest sour beers I think I've come across, but it's got that lovely, very, very dark violet type colour to it. So yeah, As I always tell you, the colour of your beer depends on a few different things. One, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, the length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. Any barrel aging that you do or any adjuncts that you put in will of course affect the colour of the beer as well. And when it comes to these Berliner Weisses and Goses and stuff like this, that is going to play a big role. So this beer will be getting most of its colour from the black currants that are in it. The other thing you can see about this beer when you put the light through it is that it is very hazy. So remember, in the new modern sour beers, it's the wheat and the oats that play a big role in determining the level of haze of this beer. And I guess, the fruit puree that they use in these is also going to play quite a big role as well. So yeah, it looks very, very nice, this one. But that is from memory, that is definitely one of the darkest kind of modern sour beers that I've come across in recent times. It looks absolutely beautiful, I have to say. So a big thumbs up to Fermenterarna. We're quite lucky in Sweden at the moment. We have some really, really good sour beer breweries. You have Morgendagens, you have Fermenterarna, you've got Duck Pond, Elm 11 down here in Skåne. Yeah, there are some very, very good sour beer breweries out there at the moment. Brewski and Helsingborg are doing some very good modern sour things as well. But other than that, I don't think we have to say anything more about the appearance of this beer. Let's have a little look at the aroma then and just see how we get on with this one. Oh, that's interesting. Now, first impression of this beer, I'm actually going to say this is a lot less kind of punchy and a lot more lighter and juicy in comparison to what I thought it was going to be. So for me, the backbone of this beer actually comes across as being very light and airy and bready in a sense, but then you get this lovely big curranty, juicy character on top of it. So this one, just when I think from memory of the other ones that we've had from Fermenterarna in the past, this one comes across as a lot more soft and juicy than the other ones we've had previously. It's really not that intense in terms of its aroma, but it's absolutely lovely, I have to say. Yeah, as I've said to you in many of these kind of sour beer reviews before, I quite often find that these sour beers are very simple and straightforward in terms of their flavour composition and things. They're not the most complex of beers, the modern sour beers, but if they're done well, they are absolutely beautiful. I really like how this goes together, actually. It gets a big, big thumbs up from me in that sense. Yeah, so let's break this aroma down for you a wee bit more and just describe it a little bit more kind of in depth, actually. So, yeah. On the, I've obviously spilt a little bit there as I've sugared it up. But anyway, in terms of the malty backbone of this beer, I would say that this one, it does have kind of what you'd expect. You've got a little bit of a kind of Jacob's cream cracker kind of note to it. You do have, let me just wipe up the little bit that's on the bottom of the glass there that I lost. Yeah, so the malty backbone of this beer, as I say, a little bit of a Jacob's cream cracker sort of thing, a soft kind of hedgehog bread crust. Definitely you're picking up some of that very fluffy, light barley malt white bread sort of thing in this one. That's a kind of trademark of the Fermenterarna IPAs as well, in my experience. They've always got a little bit of that kind of very light fluffy white bread from the barley malt that they use. But on top of that, you can certainly smell a little bit of the wheat, and the wheat is kind of thickening the beer out. But I would say the wheat takes a little bit of a back seat in comparison to the barley malt for me. You're also getting a good little bit of, I'd say that you can smell a little bit of the oats too, and that's kind of interesting. The thing that you always get from the Fermenterarna beers, in my experience, is that they smell a lot more barley malt leaning than they turn out to be in the flavour. But you are getting a little bit of a kind of slightly drier oaty character to this one. It's not a big creamy sweet oaty note that you get out of this. So that is definitely worth bearing in mind with this one. So yeah, a little bit of a kind of Jacob's cream cracker. There's also a little bit of a kind of soft white bready kind of thing in there, as we said. Bit of wheat thickening it all out. And then you've also got a bit of that smooth, slightly dry, oaty kind of thing. So, yeah, it's interesting, this one. In terms of these kind of sour beers, it's not got that. Some of them have that kind of petit filou yogurt type vibe to them. You don't get a lot of that out of this one. You really don't get a lot of that out of this beer. There is a little bit of a kind of Werther's original. There is a little bit of a kind of Werther's originals sort of thing to it, a little touch of sweetness, but yeah, the way that all goes together in this one, I think, is very, very nice. But yeah, I like how this goes together. I do absolutely like how the malty backbone goes about its business, for sure. But it's the interesting thing about this one for me is it doesn't smell quite as big and thick and creamy as we've had from Fermenterarna in the past. And I do wonder, this beer has been sitting in my fridge for about a month, month and a half maybe. So maybe it's just due to that. Maybe it doesn't smell quite as creamy as it might have done a wee while ago. And it's just, as I say, I didn't have time to take a look at this beer until now. So yeah, quite interesting for sure. Other than that, I don't think there's anything to really say about the malty side of this beer. Let's have a look at the kind of hoppy, the placebo hoppy effect, and the fruity side of things then. So, as I've told you before, when it comes to these modern sour beers, in the Nordic countries, not many brewers put hops in them because they say it's kind of pointless. It doesn't really add much to the flavour in their opinion. Now, the likes of Vault City back home in Scotland, they say it adds a little bit more depth to the flavour. And back in the day, the old, Flanders Reds, the Lambics and stuff like this, they would put old hops in them so that the bitterness of the hop didn't detract from the actual sourness of the beer. So there is a bit of a debate about this, we can say that, but it is not that common to put hops in sour beers here in Scandinavia or the Nordic countries generally, as far as I've seen. Although I have seen a few from Finland where they've specifically added, equinot or something to complement the fruits, so that they also do that. But with this one, this is interesting because I actually get quite a bit of a grassy character out of this one. It certainly does have a little bit of that almost placebo green component to it, and it's a very soft kind of light grassy note there, and there's a little bit of a smooth earthy kind of thing as well. So yeah, I really like how this beer goes about its business from that perspective. It gets a thumbs up from it does get a thumbs up from me. Yeah, so a little bit of grassiness in there, a wee touch of earthiness. Other than that, I don't think there's too much to report on the sort of green component, if we can call it that. So on the fruity side of things then, let's take a look at that. Fruity side of the beer, as I've said earlier, this one for me is very, very soft and very juicy. Of course, you're getting a lot of blackcurrant out of this one. You can smell there's a wee bit of a kind of sharp tartness to some of the blackcurrant, but overall, I really find it just very, very light and very juicy. So I'm curious to see how that translates into the flavour. Now, I'm not getting too... I do get a little bit of the yuzu character out of this one. This beer, you can smell underneath that, you get a little bit of that candied strawberry. With these sour beers, you always get a few complexities to the fruits. In this case, you're getting a bit of a candied strawberry, a candied blackberry, all of this sort of thing. And that sits underneath that does actually sit underneath the other components of the beer. But for me, the fruity, juicy berry side of things in this, I think, is very, very nice. So the yuzu character that you get in this one, you can just smell a little bit of it. For me, yuzu is obviously, they're a Japanese fruit, if you like. I always found that they have they've got like a little mix of a sort of, bright mandarin and limey aroma, but they have the pungency of a lime. I think that's a good way to describe how a yuzu comes across. But yeah, I mean, aroma wise, you're getting a little bit of that in there, so you get a lot of that juicy blackcurrant. The blackcurrant definitely dominates, but there is, pardon me, a wee bit of there is a little bit of that kind of yuzu. There is a little touch of that kind of yuzu, just kind of citrusy quality sitting underneath it. So yeah, I like how that goes together. It's quite it is quite interesting, and from that perspective. So as I always say, take a wee bit of time to just enjoy the aroma of this beer before you get stuck into it. But I think it is about time that we have a taste of this one. So yeah, this one is the Skeleton Pre-Party, a 6% Gose with yuzu and blackcurrant from Fermenterarna, the fermenters. formerly of Strömstad, but now based in Gothenburg, Göteborg, here in Sweden. Let's get stuck into this beer and see how we go. Slange, skål, cheers. Yeah. That's lovely. That really is very, very nice. I always really, really enjoy these Fermenterarna sour beers. On first impression, this one is really nice. As I say, this, just from memory, this feels a little bit lighter than some of the other sour beers I've had from these guys in the past, but it's just so nicely done. That's potentially one of my favourite sour beers that I've had from Fermenterarna. But I was actually kind of gutted because they had another one, I think, this month that was called All My Personalities, and unfortunately I missed out on that, but I might have a wee quick look at Systembolaget after this video and see if I can order it. That would be awesome to get a hold of a can of that. But yeah, this potentially is my favourite sour beer from Fermenterarna so far. It's not quite as thick, it feels very light and juicy, and it doesn't have that big a sour impact. It's one of these ones, it's just a lovely kind of easy drinking fruity beer. Yeah, I think that's a good kind of summary of the first impression that we have from this. But as we always do, let's go into it a bit more in depth and we'll break it down and describe the flavour for you properly. So, middle third of the palate then. Middle third of the palate, the backbone of this beer. You can feel there's a mix to the base of this one. You get a wee touch of that kind of Jacob's cream crackery sort of backbone to it, but you've also got that kind of fresh hedgehog bread crust thing going on. But on top of that, you actually do get, it's not too tall or too thick, a bready layer, but you can taste that nice soft trademark barley malt from Fermenterarna in this one. It's quite interesting. I'm certainly noticing that a lot more in this beer than in this sour beer than I have with some of the other ones that we've had previously. So I certainly like that with this one for sure. Yeah. So on top of that soft kind of bready barley malt layer, you can feel there is quite a light layer of wheat, and that really helps smoothen the beer out. So again, I can really, my knee's getting sore, I can really appreciate how that side of this beer goes together. Yeah, the barley malt and the wheaty side of things in this beer just give you this lovely, very, very smooth backbone, and underneath that you've got a little bit of cracker and a little bit of bread crust. I think it goes together really nicely. Toward the front of that middle third of the palate, you maybe get I get a little tiny hint of like a very slightly vanilla note out of it, maybe a little touch of wood as well. The other thing about this beer is, I don't find that this one gives you too much. It does give you do get a little bit of this kind of petit filou sort of thing to it, but not overly much. On top of that wheaty layer, you can feel there's a circle right in the middle of your palate. You can feel there's a circle there, and it's got that nice kind of smooth, creamy, oaty type vibe to it. So that's really interesting as well. Yeah, you get this lovely, you do get just a little bit of that lovely kind of petit filou, yogurty type vibe there, mixing in with all the oaty characters. But as I say, in the middle third of the palate, there's that big, smooth, creamy oaty note in there. It's not the creamiest I've come across. You are getting little elements of dryness out of it, but yeah, I do like that. And the other thing I'm noticing is that when the more that I drink of this beer, I start to get a little bit of that kind of Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy sort of thing out of it as well. And I do really appreciate that, actually. I do like that side of this beer. So it gets a thumbs up from me in that particular regard too. Yeah, other than that, I don't think there's too much to say about the middle third of the palate. I think we've covered everything. As I say, these beers tend to be very, really quite simple and straightforward in terms of their composition, but if they're done well, it can be absolutely beautiful, and this beer is no exception to that rule. So let's look at the back third of the palate then, the border region between middle third and back third of the palate. In that border region, you get a little bit of bread crust. You can feel it just kind of building up a wee bit. The base of the back third of the palate, again, you get that Jacob's cream crackery sort of thing. A little bit of the bread crust too. It's a little bit more grainy. Remember, sweeter flavours come out further forward on the palate, more grainy, bitter flavours come out towards the back. But then on top of that kind of crackery, bread crusty sort of thing, you get that tall layer of bread, and it actually feels a lot more light and airy on the back third of the palate, which is quite interesting. You can feel the wheat just creeping over and thickening out the beer even further on that back third of the palate. Then on top of everything else, you've got that more dense, doughy, white bready character from the yeast. You can feel the yeast just sitting in there and doing, just giving you that little bit more complexity. So again, I like how this goes together for sure. Lovely, lovely beer this, and again it gets a big thumbs up from me. The other thing we can say is that on the back third of the palate, the flavour is definitely taller, and then as you come further forward into the middle third of the palate, it just squashes down a wee bit, and those malty characteristics just push together that little bit more. I really like how this how the beer goes about its business in that particular regard. I don't think we need to say anything more about that, to be quite honest with you. But I think that's the malty yeasty side of this beer covered. It's very nice, this one. As I say, compared to some of the other Fermenterarnas that I've had before, it just feels a little bit lighter, to be honest with you. Again, it's a very nice kind of summery beer, this one. The other thing I would point out is that toward the kind of the front of that middle third of the palate, you start to get a little bit of the saltiness out of this beer. I don't know if they will have added salt to it, but that was always the classic thing with the Gose style, was they did put a little bit of salt in them. So I think you do get a wee touch of saltiness out of this beer toward the front of that middle third of the palate, the further into the aftertaste that you go. But let's focus on the placebo green component of this beer and the fruity and sour side of things then. So back corners of the palate, there's a teeny tiny hint of earthiness. As you move further forward, you get a little touch of herbal character and maybe a teeny bit of floral note. But I will say the sides of the palate on this beer are very smooth, but they just have a little bit of a slightly oily character to them as well. I do just get a little bit of a green placebo effect out of this one. But round the front curve of the palate, again, you've got that oily, smooth kind of thing. And it just has that little bit of grassiness to it as well, which I can certainly appreciate. So it gets a big thumbs up from me, this one, on that side of things. It just works very well. But let's focus on the front third of the palate and the fruity aspects of the beer. So the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, again, you get a little bit of a sort of bready build up to this one. You can feel that there. But the backbone of that front third of the palate, you get a little bit of the Jacob's cream cracker, a wee bit of the kind of smooth white bread, and maybe a wee touch of the oat. But on top of that, the fruity adjuncts are just kind of sitting there. The other thing I'm noticing about this one is that the further into the aftertaste you go, the more of the yuzu that you get. I'd be very curious to know what their kind of ratio of fruits in this one was when they put the puree into the brew. But I think this has turned out really interestingly, for sure. Yeah, it's the fruity side of this beer is really nice. So on top of those layers that we've described, you can feel the blackcurrant. It's interesting because the blackcurrant in this one, when you take the beer in, it does have a wee bit of a tartness and sharpness from the blackcurrant, of course. But you can feel the sort of base just on top of that bready layer we've talked about. You've got a little bit of that kind of blackcurranty. You do have a little bit of that blackcurranty bready sort of thing coming out of this one, which I do really like. On that kind of blackcurranty sort of thing, there's you're getting a few other little things in there. There's a little bit of like a candied strawberry, a little bit of an almost candied fig or something like that. I'm getting a few elements in there. But what you'll find is that blackcurranty layer that you get, it's interesting because you can feel the slightly more oily yuzu just emerging from that. And the yuzu, as I said, it's like a mix of an orange and limey flavour, but it usually has a wee bit of a pungency of the lime, and you can just feel, if you go to the dead centre of that middle third of your palate, you can feel that it's like you've got this layer of blackcurrant and blackberry, and then the yuzu just emerges gradually through it like that and becomes a bit more pungent the further that you go into the aftertaste. Now, the other thing I would point out about these sour beers is that when you add adjunct fruit into the beer, you'll always find that round the front edges of the palate, it develops a bit more of a, these, when you add fruit into any beer, it will suppress a little bit of the green component, and you can also feel this blackcurranty, this lovely fruity blackcurranty flavour just spreading round the back edges of the palate there. And I really like, I do really like how that side of this beer goes about its business as well in this one, so that gets a thumbs up from me for sure. Yeah, I think other than that, I don't think there's anything we really need to say about this beer other than the fact that it's absolutely lovely. It's a really, really nicely done beer, this one, and potentially my favourite sour beer that I've had from Fermenterarna so far. I'm just gutted I missed out on the All Your or All My Personalities, whatever it was, because that had a whole heap of different fruits in it. I would have really liked to have tried that one, but unfortunately sold out very fast. Yeah, let's round off this review then with a little look at the mouthfeel of this beer. So, mouthfeel-wise, this beer for me, it's right in the middle of the spectrum. The carbonation's very smooth. It's also almost got a little bit of a creamy and slightly silky mouthfeel to it. So I really, really like. I do really like how all of that goes together in this one. It gets a big thumbs up from me. Yeah, it does get a big thumbs up from me in that particular, on that particular note. So yeah. The fruity component in this beer for me is very, very nice actually. Yeah, so I'd say, as I said, mid-bodied, right in the middle of the spectrum, smooth carbonation, very kind of a mix of creamy and kind of silky in a sense. In terms of the hoppy bitterness, there's not a lot to report from that side of things. I'd say, technically speaking, I think this is a 0 IBU beer, but it will have like 5 IBUs or something in it. The malty backbone of this beer is very, very smooth. It builds a little bit of sweetness the further you go into the aftertaste, and it gives you a bit of creaminess, but the fruity side of this one is really interesting. As I say, it starts off quite juicy and berry-like, but then you start to get more and more of that yuzu flavour. You get a very smooth yuzu flavour in the front third of your palate. But this is a really interesting one. I've seriously enjoyed this. So if you get the chance to do this, to have a look at this beer, I highly recommend that you do. But I would love to see Fermenterarna repeat the skeleton party and the skeleton pre-party beer like once a year or something like that. I'm not sure how easy it is for them to get yuzu puree for these beers, but yeah, it would be cool. I think it'd be a shame if they only did this particular beer once. That's one of my favourite sour beers I think I've had from them thus far. But yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this one. So yeah, this was the skeleton pre-party, a 6% Gose with yuzu and blackcurrant added into the brew from Fermenterarna, now in Gothenburg, Göteborg, on the Swedish west coast. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Fermenterarna, and we will no doubt return to these guys at some point in the very near future. Until the next time, Slanger just now, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys very soon. Check out my social media, check out theirs, and we'll see you in another review very, very shortly.